This video will take you through the steps to make a Kennedy scrub cap. We're Gordy and Leslie Oliva, and while our remodeling business is paused during the coronavirus outbreak, we've begun making Kennedy caps and are donating them to the medical staff in the hospitals. This video is being offered free, and we ask that you don't profit from the caps that you make. Leslie has designed this cap that can be made quickly in less than 20 minutes and can be washed in hot water multiple times. It may not be the custom cap you're looking for, but it'll get us through this pandemic. There will be a link to the material list and pattern in the description below. This is Kennedy, the first ICU nurse who let us know there was a desperate need for caps. You'll notice these caps are designed so if you have long hair, you can pull it up and tuck it underneath the hat, and with the elastic and the ties, it should hold snugly. These are the 5 8.5 by 11 pieces that you can cut out according to the notes and tape them together. 2 for the top piece and 3 for the headband. Leslie found it helpful to laminate the final pattern once it's assembled to last through many cuts. You'll end up with 2 pieces of the pattern. The larger piece is marked to place on the fold of the fabric. A piece of fabric that's 1.25 yards in size will make 3 caps. After you fold it in half, Leslie likes to fold it again so she can make multiple pieces with just one cut. So you lay the pattern on the fabric, pin it in place, and then cut it out. To get them out to the staff as fast as possible, it was easier to cut out multiple pieces and then assemble them later. The first thing you do is to fold the headband in half, right sides together, and make sure that the edges line up. Now to the sewing machine for some setup. Put a 2-inch piece of painter's tape on the lower part of the table just to the left of the needle. Then above the needle, measure about 9 or 10 inches and put another piece of painter's tape on the table. Now the fun begins and we can start sewing. Pick up the headband and start at one end of it. With the needle right on the edge and the fold facing away from you, use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew toward the open end of the headband. You'll hear this repeatedly. When you start your seam, make sure you lock it in. Check the edges to make sure that they're still lined up and start sewing down the tie till it just passes the blue tape about 1 inch or so. Remembering to backstitch to lock in the seam. Then flip it over and repeat this on the other side. After both sides are tied up, you'll want to flip it right side out. Start with your hand, and then Leslie likes to use a metal chopstick to push it through. You can use a knitting needle, a pencil, whatever works for you. Do that to both sides and you're ready to go. Back at the ironing board, lay out the headband, smooth it out a little bit, and make sure that those edge seams are still lined up. Give it a light press just to smooth out all the bumps. Now you may notice 2 little tabs at the beginning of the curve, but don't worry because those will be hidden. Give a quick press to the headpiece and then flip it over a 1/4 inch, iron it, and then finish flipping it over to the end of the straight part and press that down to be sewn next. We're going to sew down that edge of the flap, but leave the ends open so we can slip the elastic through. Now at the machine, we're going to sew down the edge of that slot, keeping the seam very close to the edge of that fold over so we leave as much width as possible for the elastic. And again, let's do a back stitch to lock it in. We're going to leave the two ends open right now so we can slip the elastic through. Whatever your method, Leslie likes to use a safety pin to push the elastic all the way from one end to the other. Once it's through, detach the safety pin, gently pull back the elastic without stretching it, and bring it back to the machine, and sew the elastic to the fabric multiple times back and forth, because this will be a stress point when the cap is worn. And now comes the cool part. We want to hold the elastic and draw the material back so it scrunches up. And then we want to spread it back out using that piece of tape we put on earlier as a gauge for a 2-inch width. We'll clear the fabric bumps out, move it right over to the machine, and sew that edge. Without stretching the elastic, all we're doing is sewing the fabric to the elastic back and forth multiple times. Then just snip off the end of the elastic without cutting the fabric, and voila, the top piece is done. Now it's time to start putting the two pieces together. Stack the cap on top of the headband, lining up the centers right side to right side, and make sure that you pick up all 3 pieces of fabric before you pin. Start the pinning in the center and work your way out toward the elastic. Make sure that while you're pinning, all 3 pieces of fabric stay aligned and all get pinned together. And then move to the other side and repeat the pinning. When you're done pinning, you can flip it over and see the cap inside out. Turn the hat back over and check your pins and make sure that they've grabbed all the layers of the fabric. Before you start to sew, you don't want the ties facing out, you want them facing in, and you'll start with the right tie. This will be a top stitch, so line your needle up about 1/8 inch from the edge, lock in your stitch, and continue to sew down toward the elastic band. Now you'll want to pause before you get to the elastic. Grab a hold of the elastic and pull the fabric back so it lies flat. Put the elastic and the fabric flat against the tie. And run a stitch back and forth over the elastic 2 or 3 times to strengthen it. And once you pass the elastic, you want to go back to the 1/4 inch seam allowance and stitch all the way around the rest of the cap, making sure you're sewing all 3 layers. We fast forwarded all the way around the cap just before you get to the other end of the elastic. As we did on the other side, you'll want to flatten out the fabric and hold the elastic right at the edge of the fabric and continue to sew right on over the elastic. When you sew the elastic, again, make a few passes for strength. At this point, you'll want to continue with the top stitch, so keep your needle as close to the edge as possible around the rest of the cap. Again, we've fast forwarded all the way around the band to the other side of the cap to the end of the other tie. Now take a look at the seam you've just sewn and make sure you haven't missed any of the fabric, because that would leave a hole in the cap when you turn it inside out. And there you have one completed Kennedy cap. You can now feel great that you spent the last 15 to 18 minutes making a cap that our frontline heroes can wear while treating patients. And once you have your assembly line rolling, this is what 50 completed caps look like. Thank you for watching. All the information, materials, and helpful hints are listed below.